A federal grand jury has indicted Catholic Republican Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska on charges that he lied to federal investigators about illegal campaign donations from a foreign source.
About 5.5 years ago, a person from overseas illegally moved money to my campaign. I didn't know anything about this and used some other Americans to do so.
In a YouTube video released by the congressman, he denies any wrongdoing. He is charged with 1 count of scheming to falsify and conceal material facts and 2 counts of making false statements to federal investigators. Congressman Fortenberry has agreed to appear before a judge in Los Angeles next Wednesday. And joining me now is Shannon Mullen, editor-in-chief of Catholic News Agency. Shannon, welcome back. Good to be with you. This is a developing story, as you know, but the charges are serious here. What's striking is that he and his staff are claiming that they had no idea where these campaign funds came from. Does that all surprise you? And also, what more do we know about this donor?
Yeah, it is surprising and very strange in many respects, one of which is that the news really came from Fortenberry himself. He tried to get ahead of this and has gotten ahead of this. So that was unusual. The fact that this stems from something, as he said, perhaps 5.5 years ago, also unusual. The timing, of course, is critical. Fortenberry, as you mentioned, is a Catholic lawmaker, a Republican. He's been outspoken on pro-life issues. Obviously, that issue is front and center right now in the Congress. He's also been a strong advocate for persecuted Middle Eastern Christians. And as you know, they need all the advocates they can get. So on both counts there, this is a potentially very serious, not only for him, but for those who care about these issues that he's been out front on. As far as the donor, we know very little about him. He has run into trouble with the federal Justice Department on campaign contributions. He's of Nigerian and Lebanese descent. He's a billionaire, which is interesting also because as far as some of these donations, we're talking about relatively small amounts of money, presumably to used to gain influence. Small amounts, not for you and I, but perhaps for a billionaire. So there's still a lot of questions on this story that have yet to come out to be answered.
Yeah, indeed. You know, he's not the first politician in recent memory who has, gotten into trouble over questionable donations. Based on what we have seen in the recent past, Shannon, what do you think happens next?
Well, the next move, I think, is with the Justice Department and, how is this part among the questions that we have? Is this part of a much bigger investigation? So that's really one of the main questions to be answered. And, the other for Fortenberry himself, what kind of potential penalties is he looking at here? You always wonder with these kinds of cases is if there is a larger investigation that's underway here related to campaign donations, or just something that the FBI bumped into.
Yeah. And, another thing I want to talk about, kind of switching gears along here, is the Archbishop of Liechtenstein, as you know, that tiny European country, which is significantly smaller than the state of Rhode Island, has said that he won't participate in the Synod on Synodality. He cited a fear that the 2-year process risks becoming too ideological. Talk to us about the significance of that announcement, and what do you think this signals?
It is significant. First of all, yes, smaller, about the size of Rhode Island. Really, it's smaller in some respects from the suburban New Jersey community where I live. 62 square miles, about a population of around 40,000, which is actually less than live in my town. So it's a very small state, it is 75% Catholic, so we're talking about maybe 30,000 total Catholics. So the dimensions here are significant, I think, because one of the questions is if a relatively smaller and one would think more cohesive Catholic community as Liechtenstein is balking at this process, either for logistical reasons or ideological reasons, what does that portend for larger dioceses? So I think that's interesting. It also points to a larger theme, I think, that's behind the synodality process. On the one hand, there's a concern. This is a global consultative process, and on the one hand, there's a concern that minority communities need to have their voices heard on many important issues related to the Catholic Church. On the other hand, there's also a concern that vocal minorities, for example, groups that might be advocating for a liberalization of the Church's sexual morality laws, for example, could predominate, in some circumstances. So Liechtenstein might have unique circumstances on top of that that I'm not acquainted with, to be frank. But it is an interesting development at this early stage of the synodality process.
Yeah, it certainly is, and we will be keeping our eye on that for sure. Shannon, thank you so much for your time and for weighing in. Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of Catholic News Agency. Thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Tracy.